Once you've requested an evaluation, there's a series of steps that the school must follow. The first being they must hold the first of two multidisciplinary evaluation team or MET meetings. The multidisciplinary evaluation team will consist of specified individuals, including a general education teacher, special education teacher, school administrator or district representative, parents, anyone you guys want to invite that can help you in the meeting, and any specialists that are needed. That could be a school psychologist, a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, physical therapist, counselor, and on and on. At this first MET meeting, the process will involve reviewing data. This is super important. It must be data to determine whether or not an evaluation is needed. The data piece is super important because in my experience, so many schools do not provide parents with actual data. Data can only really mean one thing: numbers that relate to learning or the curriculum itself. So examples of real data would be things like a curriculum-based measure that tells you how your child is doing in relation to what's expected in the curriculum. That would be a data point that can be used to say this is their level of progress. Schools can provide state standardized tests as points of data, but this testing can be a bit misleading, so you need to understand the outcomes before you go in. You also need to understand how these school psychologists interpret the data and oftentimes misinterpret it. And that's a whole separate video. So data has to be data. So now, knowing that data is numbers in relation to a child's learning level or academic achievement as it relates to their age or the curriculum, let's talk about what isn't data and what I commonly see presented as data in the first MET meeting, MET1, to determine is testing needed, is an evaluation needed. In my experience, I've attended many meetings where the school team will present parents with information, suggest that it's data, and it's not. Examples of information they present to suggest that testing isn't needed are things like grades. Grades are not data because there's so many factors that go into grades: participation, homework completion, attitude, group projects. Grades are not a reliable source of data, and they're not objective data. They're absolutely subjective. And I've had so many situations where I have the greatest kids in the world and they work their butts off and they do 19 hours of homework a night just to get a good grade. And then the school steps in and says, well, they're doing great. They don't need any support. Well, the reality is the school isn't aware they're doing 9 hours of homework at night. Grades are not a reliable source of data. They cannot use grades to suggest they don't need to do an evaluation. It's very important you understand this because it happens all the time. Something else that's not data is, hey, we love Janie, all our teachers love her. She works hard, she's quiet, she's everything we would want in a student. That's not data. No one's arguing with the fact that Janie is an awesome human being. But what we're asking is Janie performing at levels that she should, or do we need to adjust the curriculum to support her? So liking a student or a cooperative student or a quiet student, that's not data. And it's used all the time to say, hey, let's give her more time. We all love her. We're going to work extra hard to get her caught up. Not acceptable, not data. Another area or information that isn't data that's commonly presented by school teams is behavior. If a school team were to tell you, well, Johnny isn't paying attention, he's not trying hard, he doesn't turn in his homework, so that's why he's struggling, we don't need to evaluate. That's not an adequate source of data, and that's not an adequate reason to deny an evaluation. We have to remember all behavior exists for a reason. It starts in the brain, and then it communicates something about an individual's experience. So in so many cases when I work with kiddos that are struggling to get started, stick with, and complete an activity, it's due to their frustrations because there is an underlying learning difference. It's very, very important that school teams understand this and that the larger community understand this. And we start moving away from this idea that behavior is its own thing and recognize that it has to start in the brain and it communicates something. This is never to say we're going to excuse a behavior, but we have to understand why it's occurring if we want to really get to the point where we can implement tools that will change the behavior. At the end of the day, we want to change Johnny's behavior to allow him to be more successful and to help out his teacher. So if we use the right perspective, we can accomplish both of those goals. So in summary, the first multidisciplinary evaluation team meeting is to determine if an evaluation is needed. And then each specialist there has to inform parents of what tests they plan to give and why. Then you will schedule the second MET to review that data. The final thing you need to know about that first MET is once you sign permission, which you will have to do for the team to evaluate, they now have 60 days to complete that evaluation. So they're on the clock, so to speak. So within the next 60 days, they will schedule a second MET meeting. So after you've signed permission to evaluate, they're going to hold a second MET meeting or MET2 within that 60-day time frame. At this meeting, anyone and everyone who did any form of testing has to review that testing with the parents, explain what it means, and then at the end of the meeting, the team will determine whether or not the child is eligible under one of the 13 disability categories under IDEA or IDEA. This meeting is incredibly important. It's important that you go in informed before the meeting. So always request a copy of the reports and the data before the meeting so that you can review those. Additionally, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling like the school has an agenda that doesn't align with your child's needs, you may want to consider hiring an advocate to go with you during this meeting, because this is the point at which teams determine whether or not a child meets criteria for special education. It is a critically important outcome.